Welcome to the channel. In today's video, we're going to compare two King of velocities in their respective calibers. We're going to compare the 30-378 Weatherby Magnum, which I have in front of me. We're going to compare it to the 338-378 Weatherby Magnum. So we're going to look a little bit of its history. We're going to look at definitely its ballistics. We're going to see which one's the flatter cartridge, which one has more energy downrange, and which one might be the best one for you. Hope you enjoy the video. There certainly isn't a shortage of 300 Magnums. Starting out here, we have a 300 WSM, very good cartridge. Going up a little, we have a 300 Winchester Magnum. Next up, we have the new popular 300 PRC, very efficient, great long distance cartridge. Next to that is the classic 300 Weatherby Magnum. And then we have the enormous 300 Rum next to it. And lastly, we have the king, the 30-378 Weatherby Magnum. What makes the 30-378 Weatherby so special? To kind of put it into perspective, some of the more popular 30 caliber Magnums you get are the 300 WSM and the 300 Win Mag. Well, the 30-378 Weatherby has over 1,000 more foot-pounds of energy than each of these. Kind of puts it into perspective of just how powerful the 30-378 Weatherby is. The history of the 30-378 Weatherby is that Roy Weatherby was contacted by the U.S. military to build a cartridge that could exceed 4,000 and possibly 5,000 feet per second. And so this is what he came up with, is a 378 Weatherby case neck down to 30 caliber. And I'm sure you could get some of those velocities in the really small bullets, maybe like a 100 grain bullet. But most people hunting are going to be shooting 150 grain and up. At least in the Hornady book, they don't even have 150 grain data for the 30-378 Weatherby. But a 165 grain at 3,500. A 180 grain is a very popular hunting bullet in 30 caliber, and it's over 3,400 feet per second. And the bullet I want to use to compare to the 338-378 is this 200 grain bullet, which Hornady says you can get 3,300 feet per second. Really fast velocities. Now, if you're going to use a 30-378 Weatherby, might as well start using some of the bigger bullets. A 210 type grain bullet, 3,200, a 220 grain, 3,150. This thing is a hammer. When talking about 338 Magnums, the standard, the most popular, and the do-it-all Magnum is the 338 Winchester Magnum, which is right in front of me. Now, if you want to step up, next to it is the big, ginormous 338 Remington Ultra Magnum. And then, of course, we got to go a little bigger with the 338-378 Weatherby Magnum. Sadly, I don't have the 338-378 Weatherby case, but it is basically identical to the 30-378 Weatherby case other than the neck size. And so as you can see, just the different sizes of the cases and why the 30-38-378 Weatherby is the fastest. As I mentioned previously with the 30-378 Weatherby, it was originally a Wildcat cartridge that Roy Weatherby made. So is the 338-378 Weatherby. And while the 30-378 Weatherby officially came out in 1996, the 338-378 Weatherby came out just a little after that in the late 90s. Let's just look at its performance. A 200 grain bullet, it's not the bullet I'm going to use, but again, 3,300 feet per second. I bet you could get a little more. A 225 grain at 3,200 feet per second. And the bullet weight that I want to use in today's comparison is the 250 grain. And you can get it going over 3,000 feet per second. Now let's look at the downrange performance. So I'm loading the 30-378 Weatherby with a 200 grain AccuBond with a decent BC of 0.588. Muzzle velocity of 3,300 feet per second. And your energy out of the muzzle, incredible, 4,800 foot-pounds of energy. Again, 1,000 more than the 300 WSM and 300 Win Mag. Recoil. You're not going to want to shoot this rifle without a muzzle brake. Okay. Now let's just take it out to hunting distances, and I want to remember these numbers when we're comparing it to the 338, 378. But the bullet's going 2644. Energy, about the same as a 30-06 out of the muscle. So 3,105 foot-pounds of energy, and only 18.57 inches of drop. Again, this is one of the flattest shooting cartridges in the world. And then with both of these being these ultra velocity magnums, I'm just curious to see what it can do out to 1,000. Again, don't hunt out to 1,000. I'm just curious to see what it can do though. So the bullet's still going 1,819 feet per second, and your energy is at 1,470 foot-pounds. Wow. And only 211.3 inches of drop. Now we're on to the 338, 378 Weatherby, 250 grain AccuBond with a similar BC at 0.575. Your muzzle velocity 3,050 feet per second, and then your energy, it's going to be about 300 more foot-pounds. Again, recoil, don't shoot this without a muzzle brake. It will punish you. Take it out to hunting distances. The bullet is going slower, obviously, but you're also shooting a bullet that's 50 grains heavier. But your energy is going to be about 100 more foot-pounds. And because it's going slower and it's a bigger bullet, there's going to be about 4 more inches of drop compared to the 378 Weatherby. But that's still a really flat shooting cartridge right there out to 400 yards. Now, obviously, we'll take this out to 1,000 as well. The bullet is going 1,623 feet per second. Again, slower. And then look at the energy. They're within 8 foot-pounds of each other. Pretty crazy. And then a bit more drop. So the 378 Weatherby only had 211 inches of drop, and this one basically has 257 inches of drop. So the 378 Weatherby is flatter. Now let's talk about some pros and cons of each of these cartridges. I'm going to first start with the 378 Weatherby. Let's start with the pros. It's going to be flatter shooting than the 338, 378 Weatherby, at least out to 1,000 yards. I also think you have a much wider bullet selection, and especially during the pandemic, you're going to be able to find 30 caliber bullets much more easily. Now let's talk about some of the cons for the 378 Weatherby. It's not as efficient. Now, efficiency really isn't that big of a deal, especially with these 378 Weatherby Magnum cases, but you're going to get a little bit more out of the 338, 378 Weatherby for how much powder you're putting in it. The next con for this cartridge is, I don't like talking about this, but I do think this one is a pretty big con, is that barrel life is going to be shorter than the 338, 378 Weatherby. Now again, you're going to use this for a hunting cartridge. You're not going to have to worry about barrel life. But if you start shooting this thing more consistently, the barrel life is going to be shorter. Now to the pros and cons of the 338, 378 Weatherby. Let's just start with number one, that it's going to have more energy at most distances, especially in typical hunting distances, out to 300-400 yards, it's going to have a decent amount more energy. And you're going to be able to shoot bigger, heavier bullets. That's the next pro, is that I feel like this is a more do-it-all hunting cartridge for the world than the 378 Weatherby. So you could shoot up to 300 grain bullets in this cartridge, and it's going to be shooting them pretty darn fast. Now let's start with the cons of this. You're not getting as much velocity as you should with how huge this case is. It's really only about 100 feet per second faster than the 338 Lapua Magnum. And so, again, efficiency, I preferred, if I was ever to get one of these cartridges, and this is the case for both of them, I would really want it in a 30-inch barrel. That way, I bet you could get at least 100, maybe even 200 feet per second more in both of these. That way you're really using the case potential. So it's not as fast as it should be, and the other thing is it's not as flat as the 3378 Weatherby. Now, which one would I choose if it came down to it? I would probably go, well, that's a hard one. I really like 30 caliber, but I also think 338 is awesome. I would probably pick the 338 378 Weatherby. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.